Yokota Air Base quiet hours in effect. Control tower is closed. Pilot-operated approach lighting is not available. For weather and additional information, contact Yokota Approach on 270.64118.3. Yokota Air Base quiet hours in effect. Control tower is closed. Pilot-operated approach lighting is not available. For weather and additional information, contact Yokota Approach on 270.64118.3. Yokota Air Base quiet hours in effect. Control tower is closed. Pilot-operated approach lighting is not available.
Mark Kulak is Housatonic.live, 3:36 afternoon on Monday, September 22nd, year 2025. On last night's episode, which I've re-listened to a couple of times, just looking for little things that I could have improved or things that I worded poorly, and then sometimes just appreciating it, just how badass it really is. I mean, geesh, if there was content that was that groundbreaking elsewhere, I'd listen to it. Hey, not my fault. And it's not because of the people on talent. It is because they're paid to lie about why people die. They're paid to help you not get anywhere. They are paid, they're promoted. That's why there are channels on Rumble that have, on average, more views than they have subscribers. First off, if someone watches a video on a channel, there's a certain odds that they'll subscribe to it. The fact that there's more viewers regularly on some channels on Rumble than there are views per video on some channels on Rumble than there are overall subscribers to that channel means that it's a boost. Someone's paying for a boost. Rumble's doing it free of charge, or someone else is paying for it unbeknownst to the content creator, which is unlikely, or the content creator themselves is paying for it. Anyways, after that magnificent show I did yesterday, here we are. I played some clips from the Quentin Tarantino, I think this is a 2008 or a 2009 interview he did on a Charlie Rose show. There are so many amazing interviews. I think it's charlierose.com that Charlie Rose has done. His Charlie Rose interviewing style, it's very relaxed. It's not intimidating. I think Charlie Rose has probably aced how to look like there's a genuine interview going, when in reality there is not actually a genuine interview happening. It looks like Charlie Rose just so relaxed and he's just bringing out this amazing content and conversation in people, but I think that there's a lot of scripting behind it. It's an incredible show. And now that you think about it, you're like, wow, why is that there are so many gold mines in there on the charlierose.com? It's because Charlie Rose, he might actually be the best in the world at doing that, ever. He might be. Larry King, I think, actually did real interviews sometimes, okay, maybe most of the time. I don't think Larry King did quite as much scripting. And that's why you have this amazing catalog of videos available online from Charlie Rose, because they are part of the script. I highlight them not because there's nothing but absolute facts being shared between the people. It's not that what they're saying is true, but it is true that they're saying what they said and it was captured. And they said what they said when they said it. That's the true part, okay? And I think it's important to look at that, to capture that. Even though it's been captured, I suspect that one of the reasons why so many of these videos are still online with charlierose.com is because most people don't know how to use it. I think the internet is still very powerful if you know how to use it, but most people just sit back, open it up, and accept the feed. And they even let the feed tell them what to do, basically. There's very few uncontrolled individuals, uncontrolled citizens such as myself, who have totally stopped listening to the feed. That's it. They can't control me anymore. The feed is done. I know the feed is nothing but manipulation. I can mine Charlie Rose. I know how to use it right now. Not many people do. So Quentin Tarantino is sharing his Leni Riefenstahl experience, his passion and love for cinema, which I think is real. I've seen enough Quentin Tarantino to know that he's got a lot of facts ready to go. But it's possible that Tarantino really, it's coming to my realization right now, he's not He's not the director I thought he was. He isn't. He knows how to network probably. He has sold people on getting into certain movies. I think he has a lot of book smarts on a lot of the history of cinema, and I think he knows way more about the history of cinema and film and how it's been used for propaganda than most people have realized. Now, I'm not saying that he is Lenny, the second incarnation of Leni Riefenstahl. I just think that he's probably has studied her. And the movie Inglourious Bastards, which is, in his words, the first time he has really written his own script, almost completely, is almost a love letter to the history of cinema, and in particular, 1930s German pre-World War II, Weimar Republic, pre-Third Reich cinema. It really was groundbreaking. There really wasn't anything else like it at the time. That's true. But he has this love affair with it. And that's what the movie Inglourious Bastards is about. And he does this deep dive interview on the Charlie Rose show. Now, I'm sure he's talked about this elsewhere, but it just so happens that this is probably the most in-depth interview and the longest interview he's done on point about this out there that I can find. I'm sure he's had off-the-cuff conversations with people that have gone longer and more detail, but he did this with Charlie Rose. There's thousands. I believe there must be in the thousands of Charlie Rose interviews. I've shared some of them before. Among the other Charlie Rose interviews that I've shared are Peter Hotez and Jeffrey Sachs. Most people don't know that Peter Hotez and Jeffrey Sachs are good friends. Peter Hotez is a very famous, oftentimes disheveled-looking virologist, epidemiologist who works down in Baylor or Texas Children's Health Hospital, something like that. And he's worked on some vaccines for some types of parasites, and he's a huge promoter of childhood vaccines. And when it comes to the outbreak of SARS, or in particular the outbreak of SARS-CoV-2, he is on the stage. Okay, he gets a lot of television time. He gets in front of Congress, and he is seen as someone who is just a disaster and just a terrible person by people who are on the political right. Many of them, not all, but quite a few. And he's adored by people on the political left, even though there's many people who are on the political right who are not doubtful of vaccines at all. But okay, that is Peter Hotez. And then there's Jeffrey Sachs, who is an American, who is, or has been over the last 10 or 15 years, at least the last 10 years, the most frequent guest speaker at the Vatican. The Vatican Catholic Church. Now, I haven't itemized a list, but that is a quote which I found on a Vatican website. The most frequent guest speaker at the Vatican over the last era, and I think that refers to like 10 or 12 years. And many people don't see these two people as being connected, but they are on the Charlie Rose show together. And Peter Hotez is, it's Jeffrey Sachs's wife, who works with a lot of UN-type causes. Maybe not UN formally, but a lot of similar causes, anti-war, protecting the kids against diseases and stuff. She is, I think her second most frequent co-author is Peter Hotez, meaning Peter Hotez is deeply entrenched and networked inside the Jeffrey Sachs family. Most people don't know this. And as much as the not actual right, the controlled fake right, such as John F. Kennedy Jr. and Children's Health Defense and Robert Malone, want to pretend that they are not actually still collectivists and leftists in disguise, I was able to find quotes from Dr. Robert Malone's wife, Jill Glaspell Malone, that says that she and her husband deeply admire Peter Hotez, and that was from a forum from back in 2015 or 2016. So, and to see Peter Hotez and Jeffrey Sachs side by side on the Charlie Rose show, amongst other people such as Lori Garrett, who is a journalist who promotes a lot of the SARS narratives and Ebola narratives. Lori Garrett, I think, is referenced in some of these books which I have here. There's something going on with the Charlie Rose show. Okay, clearly it's a platform. It's a place to be able to present information. Now, knowing that Quentin Tarantino is making this big announcement of his love affair of Leni Riefenstahl, pre-World War II German cinema, and how it is a big part of the movie Inglourious Basterds. It's kind of the root of it, actually, an inspiration of sorts. And he's doing it on the Charlie Rose show. I need to put my money where my mouth is. I need to put my search engine where my mouth is, I guess. And I have made statements that, it's not a statement, it's the truth, that Inglourious Basterds, Quentin Tarantino, a lot of his initial funding came from Miramax and came from Harvey Weinstein. And Quentin Tarantino was on the Academy, actually led the Academy's group, or the voting group, that determined that Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11 was going to win the Academy Award, Best Documentary or something like that, back in 2004. And Quentin Tarantino associates or friends or ex-girlfriends such as Kathy Griffin seem to be on the TV at the right time, at the right place, with faux decapitated heads of the President of the United States leading the Trump derangement syndrome. And Quentin Tarantino funders and business partners like Harvey Weinstein then went into business shortly afterwards with Steve Bannon. So if Quentin Tarantino has a network connection of sorts with Charlie Rose, then I should expect to find Steve Bannon with Charlie Rose. And putting my search engine where my mouth is, right, I should also find Harvey Weinstein with Charlie Rose. And then the challenge question would be, well, given the fact that we all know by now, even though most people don't have anything between the legs to be able to admit it, that this is the most important book in understanding September 11th, 2001. Judith Miller, Stephen Engelberg, William Broad, Germs, published anyways, made available for sale September 9th, 2001, talking about all the most important people in the events of 2001, including the guy who became the executive director of the 9/11 Commission, and Craig Venter and Lederberg, and oh my goodness, William Clark, many people in the DOD, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Thomas Monath, who went on to become a boss of Robert Malone. All of the names are in here. Bill Patrick, they're talking about anthrax and crop dusters and DNA vaccines, because the old anthrax vaccines can't be made fast enough or clean enough. Thank you, Meryl Nass. The book is basically a how-to. It covers everything that you need to know, really, to understand what the real plan was on 9/11. But most people won't mention this book because they're, well, you know what? Meow. They're just little weaklings who are paid to take money to not talk about this book. They'll talk about a book about how someone that was having sex with Lee Harvey Oswald somehow was working with Castro and pyramids and space aliens, working with a pedophile who lives on an island or something like that with Israel and this and that, and there's a project over here and a bridge and I don't know how that's all connected to a JFK assassination going back to the Venetians and everything else. But they won't talk about the most important book in the room because they're paid to make sure you don't hear about this book. But anyways, the challenge question would be, wouldn't it be incredible if not only Harvey Weinstein is connected with Charlie Rose and Steve Bannon is connected with Charlie Rose, but wouldn't it be incredible if on the night of September 11th, 2001, Charlie Rose has Judith Miller, the author of Germs, in his studio, and her looking pretty pissed off, like something happened that wasn't supposed to happen? Well, that's the challenge. So we're gonna answer those three inquiries quickly, and that's the show for today. So first one is Harvey Weinstein, and the answer: are they connected? Answer: yes. I don't like using Google AI. By the way, most of the time Google AI is just doing a copy of an article that it already found. So I'm not a big fan of it, but sometimes it is what it is. Harvey Weinstein and Charlie Rose were both influential figures who became associated with the Me Too movement. Isn't that convenient for helping keep America divided, following allegations of sexual misconduct and harassment against them, though their careers unfolded differently. Well, they did, but they are connected. Charlie Rose is known for moderating a panel at the 2008 IAB conference where he interviewed Harvey Weinstein. So they have interviewed. Later, both Weinstein and Rose faced widespread public backlash and professional repercussions after allegations of sexual assault and harassment against them emerged, contributing to a broader cultural shift towards sexual misconduct. The conference was the MIXX conference in 2006. The event was hosted by the Interactive Advertising Bureau, the IAB, and was described featuring a powerful combination of the two industry figures. So they're networked. Okay, it is what it is, and there's a lot of guys who are pigs. So is it possible that Charlie Rose and Harvey Weinstein were both pigs and both happened to be called out for sexual misconduct at the same time, and both were probably number one and number two of the Me Too movement, showing how guys are pigs? It's possible. But again, I don't want to turn into a he said versus she said, but it seems odd. It's almost too perfect. That's my problem with it. It seems too perfect. Those were the two guys? Really? It was that combination that was the lead. Because I'm sure that there's a bunch of other guys, this whole casting couch thing, and we're pigs and so on. It's just odd. It stopped there? I don't know. There's something odd about that. It almost as if it was meant to cut them out and then have people focus on that as opposed to, coming up with lies about September 11th, 2001. Now, God, strike me down and hate me if you want. But the Me Too movement was not the murder movement. It was guys being monsters, being inappropriate. But you know what? I don't think they were stabbing anybody. And all corruption is enabled by tackling problems out of order of priority. So when you have the entire alt media, and I say this very personally today, ignoring 1 million fatal drug overdoses. Fatal, not raped. How many people had a child killed with a drug overdose who wished their child was still alive but had a sexual encounter with Charlie Rose? Yeah, I'm saying some pretty harsh things right now because it's time to tackle problems in order of priority. Not to mention the number one reason why any person, in particular young people, find themselves in situations where they are sexually taken advantage of, aside from domestic, is usually drug addiction. And isn't it sick that people would rather do all kinds of funny memes with Jeffrey Epstein puckering his lips than they would actually be willing to spend a few minutes talking about the scale and the magnitude and number of deaths in the drug epidemic in the United States of America? They would rather focus on their meme drawing time than actually talking about the number of dead, because talking about the number of dead and the ages of those deaths would lead people with no choice but to then realize that what we had was a dropping life expectancy because of fatal drug epidemic. And then people such as Shannon Joy, who actually gets more views per video on Rumble than she has subscribers all the time, is actually more interested in doing pucker-up memes with Jeffrey Epstein than she is in talking about a drug epidemic which has killed 1 million people. So they're connected. So Steve Bannon has not been on the Charlie Rose show. However, though, it is noteworthy that after Steve Bannon got kicked out of the Trump White House, this is from 8 years ago, September 7th, 2017. Where's the first place he runs to? 60 Minutes and Charlie Rose.
Steve Bannon served as the president's chief strategist until leaving the White House last month after clashing with other aides.
In this Sunday's episode of 60 Minutes, Bannon talks to Charlie Rose in his first in-depth TV interview since leaving the administration. Here's a preview.
Well, how do you want to be perceived, you, today? Because you have a media
Tarantino, Harvey Weinstein, and Steve
I think it's pretty
Bannon.
accurate. I'm a street fighter. That's what I am.
You're more than that.
No, I think I'm a street fighter. By the way, I think that's why Donald Trump and I get along so well. Donald Trump's a fighter, great counterpuncher. He's a fighter. I'm going to be his wingman outside for the entire time to protect.
So you'll not be attacking Donald Trump in your role?
No. Our purpose is to support Donald Trump. By the way,
and destroy his enemies?
To make sure his enemies know that there's no free shot on goal. By the way, after the Charlottesville situation, that's what I told General Kelly. I was the only guy that came out and tried to defend him. I was the only guy that said he's talking about something, taking it up to a higher level. Where did this all go?
He's also one of the two narrative sources of 9/11. That's it. There's his narrative, and then there's the Michael Moore narrative, which was funded by Miramax, Disney, Harvey Weinstein. Of course, Disney right now is also back in the news because it's Disney that kicked Jimmy Kimmel off the air. Isn't that crazy? Again, fueling more either Trump derangement or I don't know, keeping the conservative media, the fake conservative media, all pumped up, thinking that they won, they scored a win. Who cares what people are saying on late night television? Who cares? If you're not watching it, first of all, Disney can kick off whoever they want. Everyone's an employee at will. Sorry. But it really? Disney again? So there we are. Both of them. Harvey Weinstein, his narrative, paid, which was actually videoed by Michael Moore, funded by Miramax. And then, of course, Harvey Weinstein, after that was done in 2004 and 2005, goes into business with Steve Bannon. And then Steve Bannon, face of evil, that's the name of the movie. He is a face of evil, though. Then came up with the other 9/11 narrative in 2004, production starting in 2003. 100% of your allowable 9/11 narratives. Crazy enough, Steve Bannon also gave us Guangzhou Qiao, Chinese spies, talking about the lab leak, pandemic, war room, all of that stuff. A huge part of it was a real virus. It's really pathogenic, but they made it in a laboratory, or they captured it in a laboratory, and it came out of a Chinese laboratory because Chinese people are dirty, so Bannon would say. All the narratives. Charlie Rose in the middle. But here's the winner. This is it. This is September 11th attacks. The night of September 11th, 2001. Wouldn't it be crazy if on the night of September 11th, 2001, this central figure in doing all of these stage, fake, although very sincere and genuine, authentic-looking interviews, Charlie Rose, just happens to have on the author of the most important book in understanding 9/11? That would be wild. No, but let's watch the intro. September 11th, 2001.
From our studios in New York City, this is Charlie Rose.
Welcome to the broadcast. We come to you live this evening. Today, there was a major terrorist attack on the country. As many of you know, it began this morning at 8:45 a.m. 4 planes were hijacked. 2 of them crashed into the World Trade Center.
4 planes were hijacked. They crashed. Absolutely true, according to both the Michael Moore narrative 3 years later and the Steve Bannon narrative 3 years later.
A 3rd plane crashed into the Pentagon. A 4th crashed in Somerset, Pennsylvania. Here are some scenes of these events, courtesy of CNN.
Began just before 9 a.m. American Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles crashed into one of the twin towers of the World Trade Center. Then, 10 minutes later, the second plane, a United flight also from Boston to Los Angeles, crashed into the second tower. The twin towers, a symbol of American economic power, stood wounded in the morning sky. Then, they stood no more.
Today is obviously one of the most difficult days in the history of the city.
Fast forward a little bit here.
This date may be remembered for a long time as well. Many people have predicted a terrorist attack inside the United States.
Well, yes, they did. They predicted it inside the United States specifically so the U.S. Army can't protect the United States.
But everyone was surprised by the extent of what happened today.
That's right. They were surprised. It was supposed to be a biological terror attack only.
Tonight,
and then after the buildings were evacuated because the planes went in it, proof of a suitcase nuke.
Concerns of Americans and many around the world is for the victims and their families. There are more questions this evening than there are answers. Questions such as how many casualties, who did it, how will the United States respond, and what will this event do to the nature of American life? Joining us this evening for this live broadcast are a distinguished group of public officials and journalists. They include General Wesley Clark from Little Rock, Arkansas, former UN Ambassador Richard Holbrooke here in New York, former National Security Advisor to President Clinton Samuel Berger here in New York, General Ephraim Snee of Israel, who was Deputy Defense Minister under Prime Minister Barak and is now Minister of Transportation in the Unity Government of Israel.
What are political leaders of Israel doing there? What are political leaders of Israel doing there? Why not political leaders from Bolivia or Ecuador, Zaire, Lithuania, Finland? That doesn't make any sense. Unless, of course, Israel played a role. Of course they played a role, which is why they're there, for narrative control. Now, I'm sure by this time, Charlie Rose has been briefed. Charlie Rose has probably been through hell for 14 hours before this show. I could be wrong in this one, but I suspect Charlie Rose was not briefed. Charlie Rose was on team DNA transfection. Charlie Rose was on team Human Genome Project. Charlie Rose is on team, I think it's a great idea to use the U.S. military for medical experimentation and to roll out DNA vaccines in the form of anthrax vaccines after an anthrax attack. That's the Charlie Rose that I would predict. So Charlie Rose now, after everything unfolded the way it did, I'm sure is not a happy camper, okay? This is not the script he was on for years. 4 or 5 years he was on a script. And now tonight, everything's thrown off. So he has been through a lot trying to get up to speed. So I'm sure one of the Israeli people that's there is about keeping him on narrative for the unexpected twist.
Also here, Judith Miller from the New York Times, author of...
Of course she's there. Her presence is every bit as important as the head of the U.S. military and everyone from Israel. Because she, and I'm not saying that, she wrote this book entirely herself and she just did all of this incredible journalism, okay? Judith Miller is a narrative controller and a very, very high-ranking and powerful intelligence asset. And I mean that as far as national security and narrative control. Judith Miller is way up there. There's not many more in media. I'm not saying she's the brightest bulb on the tree. I'm not saying these are all of her ideas. What I am saying is Judith Miller is in the know. Judith Miller's presence is every bit as important as the head of the Israeli military or U.S. military, Secretary of State, everything else at that meeting. Because it's Judith Miller that wrote this book, which if people would read it, and you need to read it multiple times, and more importantly, listen to the Amazon audiobook and the 40% of it they cut out. 40% of this book is so damning to understanding September 11th, 2001, that they cut it out from the Amazon Audible audiobook. This is the most censored on Amazon Audible. The most censored book ever on Amazon Audible is this book. And Charlie Rose, Mr. Narrative Controller, has her there on the evening of September 11th, 2001. Now, it's possible that Judith Miller got advance notice of what was going to happen maybe a day ahead of time. I think that she probably would have been taken in, okay, and put into a room with no cell phones and no internet access, probably the evening of September the 10th. Although I think beforehand, she probably didn't know what the military was going to do. I don't think she knew. I don't think she knew how they were going to pull that off and preempt everything that was predicted in the book that she wrote and was made available, published on September 9th, 2001. I'm just going to go back to the introduction here.
Include General Wesley Clark from Little Rock, Arkansas, former UN Ambassador Richard Holbrooke here in New York, former National Security Advisor to President Clinton Samuel Berger here in New York, General Ephraim Snee of Israel, who was Deputy Defense Minister under Prime Minister Barak and is now Minister of Transportation in the Unity Government of Israel, Also here, Judith Miller from the New York Times, author of Germ, America's Secret War Against Biological Weapons.
Look at her eyes. Her eyes just, she just looks down. She's like, shit. She knows how bad it is that this book is on the bookshelves right now. This book is one of the biggest problems. She knows. Now, one of the reasons why the book was able to stay up for sale is because of the anthrax letters. The anthrax letters, allowed the narrative to be reoriented back towards being about biological terrorism. Because of the events of September 11, 2001, there was no large-scale biological terror attack, and the focus on crop dusters and dropping anthrax or smallpox, most likely would have been anthrax on crowds, and the DNA vaccines, that focus was taken off of that, but they were able to put it back on. And it's so obvious that she played a role in that she even received one of the hoax anthrax letters. She was even part of the anthrax letter story, getting America back on track. And because basically every citizen journalist out there, minus a couple, if you watch my program, you know who they are basically frauds. They are frauds who take your money to lie about why people die and in turn enable more death. That's what they do. They don't save any lives. They let the drug epidemic happen, and they're still taking your money. If those people, was it 8 years ago right now, I picked up on this book, maybe 7. I started reading it, I started sharing it, and no one would share it. Because they take money to lie about why people die. And that's why this book, they just had, the 24th, Getting to the Truth, Getting Deeper, Turning the Tide, something or other, on 9/11. No one even mentioned the existence of this book. So they've been able to keep a lid on it because they control most of the alt media as well. That's why the book has remained. But with respect to Audible, they cut out huge sections of the book. And I guess most people just don't read books. I don't care how many books you see on people's shelves. Most people don't read them. They put the books back there to suggest that they've read them. But maybe they just listen to it. I think most people just listen to books. I don't think they actually sit down and read them anymore, unless it's a work of fiction, something that's been made up. So Judith Miller, author, most important book to understanding 9/11 of all the places. Where was she? She was with someone who's been associated with, interviewing with, controlling narratives, Quentin Tarantino, Harvey Weinstein, Steve Bannon. On the night of 9/11, 2001, she is with Charlie Rose in the Charlie Rose studio. It's just one more screaming piece of metadata that I assume people will ignore. You can just go back to what you're doing, scream Epstein louder, and get back to your other BS conspiracies, and just I guess get back to asking for money. That's what you do. But okay, but we're just going to keep on doing the real work here. That's my quick show for today. I love you guys very much. All corruption is enabled by tackling problems out of order of priority. Love you. God bless.